first want to say that my family life has been the best it's ever been ever, which is, you think, oh, he's going through all this hardship. Well, when you put God at the center of your life and you do what you're called to do, everything else gets easier, right? Even Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into a fiery furnace thinking they would die. It was so hot that the men that threw them in got seared and died. But yet there they were standing singing praises along with the angel of the Lord. And I say all that to show that just because you're going through what the world thinks is hardship doesn't have to be actual hardship. It's for a time such as this that I was put in this position. And what's interesting is in Hebrew, the word for blood and the word for money are the same. And the reason they're the same is they're supposed to connect those ideas. That's why we put our blood in a bank and our money in a bank. That's, for a body to work, you have to have blood circulating. For an economy to work, you have to have money circulating. And when you work, you get reimbursed. When you give your time, your blood, basically, you get reimbursed with money. And so basically, I'm using my life, my blood, the life of my blood, to fight for myself. But my tax money, your tax money, is also being extracted from you, used to fight against me. And I see this happening, that eventually they will just run the clock out, because I'll drain dry long before they will, because they're using my blood to fight against me. That was just verbal counseling. Just Sigoloff, knock it off. And I'm not going to lie. In fact, that's one of the things that I won't do, because I have to look in the mirror. I have to be able to sleep at night. And I have to be able to look at my kid's face and say, look, I was brave, I was courageous, and I did the best I could do. And I told the truth. How can I expect them to do different if I go to work every day and do what I believe is kneeling before a tyrant? How can I do that?
Now there's 3 separate lawsuits going, one where you're actually personally suing Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. So tell me the progression of these lawsuits. And I mean, I know this is kind of tough, but summarize what's going on with each lawsuit and where it stands.
So there's Robert v. Austin, and in Robert v. Austin, that is a prior immunity case. So Dan Roberts said, hey, I've had this infection. I'm no longer contagious because the way we think of medicine, once you're infected, you typically get some sort of immunity. Even if it's the common cold, you get immunity for that year, or the flu, you get immunity for that year. And so that was his case. Right around the time when that case needed more information, it was a pure God thing that I was suspended, and I was calling every lawyer I could, and I ended up talking to Dale Saran. And Dale Saran was specifically instrumental in the anthrax Doe versus Rumsfeld case. And actually, Doe lives not too far from me and lives down the street, and I've sat and talked with him about some of these, to help strategize about these issues. And Dale Saran really liked my idea of using a medical exemption, and the angle of the medical exemption is these compounds in here are not validated for human use. That's what the 2 of the lipid nanoparticle says. It says not validated for human use. And if you look at the safety data sheet, it says that the end user is responsible for all safety of it. Basically, whoever touches this stuff, this company is no longer responsible. It's your problem. Many of the toxicology reports.
It's basically like a disclaimer right in there. Like,
right,
you accept
exactly.
the harm for if you're going to go ahead and get this thing. And yet it was mandated, which is kind of why there's the lawsuits, correct?
Correct. Exactly. Precisely. And in fact, the reason we have laws, so for instance, 21 USC 360BBBB3 and 10 USC 1107 alpha, the reason those laws are on the books is because the law that was passed after the Doe versus Rumsfeld case was won. Because they were using experimental use products in service members, and they were they were coercing them to get them. And there was terrible injuries that happened to service members back then.
And you're talking about which thing
This is
specific?
the anthrax
The
case
anthrax. Okay. Yeah.
back in 2004, 2005.
Gotcha.
And, I mean, this is
Here's the
stuff
thing, though. I mean, because that's been brought up quite a bit. Why is it that it seemed like there was accountability? I mean, I guess from my perception, pretty quickly when it came to the anthrax thing, but there's just nothing. It feels like there's nothing being done about this.
You're right. I mean, there's people fighting, but the problem is when we get to the courtroom is we're not starting on the assumption that everything's been illegal from the start, because it clearly breaks the law as it's written. And so if someone is told to wear a mask inside of a building, this happened to me maybe a month ago or 2 months ago. I went to the dentist office on post, and they said, you have to wear a mask. And I said, I choose not to. because of, again, those same two laws, 21 USC 360 BBBB3 and 10 USC 1107 alpha. Anything that's covered under EUA, it's unlawful for a service member to be coerced or forced or ordered to wear it or use it. And a medical mask, all of them are covered under EUA for COVID.
Now, when you bring that up, you also get hit with the fact checker saying, like, no, 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 it was fully approved. And so then that's when we come into this whole community. I've had this conversation with another person that's just barely ever able. I got hit with YouTube for daring to talk to Dr. Robert Malone. But he was talking about and explaining that there's only one brand, if you will, community that was quote unquote fully approved, and we've never even had access to it. So that's how they get you, I guess.
Right, and it's interesting that you bring that up because about a year ago, well, maybe, yeah, it was almost a year ago. I put up a video and I got this audio clip from this man named Chad. He's in the Coast Guard, and on his post, they had a vial that said it actually had the words printed Comirnaty, which is a huge problem because if it wasn't made at an FDA site, then it's mislabeled and that's a felony. And it took a whole conspiracy of people to bring it here to give it to service members. And so he called the Pfizer rep, and the Pfizer rep took down the lot number, looked it up in her system, and found out that that particular lot number, it's lot number FW1331, was made in France. Well, there is no FDA approved manufacturing site in France. There's one in Belgium, but if it's not made in France, if it's made in France and there's no approved site there, then it's mislabeled and that's a felony. And there was an entire conspiracy to bring this medication overseas to give it to service members to commit fraud against service members and medical assault and potentially assault with a deadly weapon.
Is that what you've just laid out? Is that laid out in any of these lawsuits or anything being done about that?
In Coker v. Austin, so I'm involved in that as a named plaintiff, and my declaration, the reason I'm in that lawsuit, and this is the second lawsuit that I entered into, and this is as a plaintiff, I outline the shadow policy that's in place where it shields commanders and allows them to practice medicine without a license, because my commander is practicing medicine without a license, making specific medical decisions for specific patients, and withholding life-saving medication, ivermectin. And so I outline all of that in there, and how she's being shielded by the chain of command through this ambiguity that is between the medical system and the military system. Because a lot of people go, well, a commander can do that. No, a commander, unless they are licensed to practice medicine, cannot commit the felony of practicing medicine without a license.
Unbelievable. And so, when did you first start? Because you're still being persecuted. You're still suspended from 2 clinics, basically just trying to watch out and speaking out, and which is crazy again, because we're seeing this happen congruently, because many of the viewers that will watch this have heard about what's happening with the FBI and the FBI whistleblowers like Steve Friend and Kyle Seraphin, and how they can't even get another job. And here you are, another whistleblower, and you've been suspended. I mean, these things aren't supposed to happen to whistleblowers. I mean, there's actual laws in place to protect whistleblowers, but they just do anyways. You're all being persecuted. It's unbelievable.
Right, and you're absolutely correct. So this past July, I got an email that was accidentally sent to me, is the only guess that I can have. They didn't know how to spell my last name because, apparently it's pretty complicated. So they wrote my name out in the CC line of the email, and they forgot to take it out. And the subject said, subject of tomorrow's threat working group. So this is counterintelligence agency. It's the 902nd. And if anybody who's military intelligence knows, the 902nd is the one who investigates terrorists, basically. And they were calling me a national security threat. And the only subject of tomorrow's meeting was Sam Sigoloff. And it had my DOD number, my date of birth, all the information about me. So the next day I called them up and said, hey, so I have the time of the meeting, but where is the meeting? Because I want to be there to help you, to give you all the information that you need straight from...
This is about me.
Right. And he said, who? And he said, and I told him Sam Sigoloff, and he goes, oh, just a minute. Click. Hangs up. It was clearly he's the insider threat because he can't send an email appropriately. Because if I was a bad guy, I'd be tipped off and I wouldn't have let him know.
It's so unbelievable. So you first started getting pushed back or suspended back in 2020 or 2021?
21, whenever the shots, I think they came out early in February or something like that.
And what was the
That was just
allegation?
verbal. That was just verbal counseling. Just Sigoloff, knock it off. And I'm not gonna lie. In fact, that's one of the things that I won't do, because I have to look in the mirror. I have to be able to sleep at night. And I have to be able to look at my kid's face and say, look, I was brave, I was courageous, and I did the best I could do, and I told the truth. How can I expect them to do different if I go to work every day and do what I believe is kneeling before a tyrant? How
Mhm.
can I do that? I can't.
Absolutely. And then you were actually reinstated, and then
Right.
what
So what you're saying is, I was suspended at Fort Huachuca. That's where I'm currently stationed, and I came here to be the medical director. And then I was suspended within about 2 months or so. And then after I was a federal witness with an affidavit in Robert v. Austin, after I was a named plaintiff in Coker v. Austin, after I was one of those DMED whistleblowers, then I was suspended at my previous duty station where I no longer had privileges. Clearly retaliation.
clearly, and again, there's laws against this, and there's supposed to be protections for whistleblowers. How can you fight for your rights with that when it comes to that?
Yeah, so that's why there is now Sigoloff v. Austin, and then the Secretary of Defense and the commanding general at my fort.
That is the
Be,
basis for those lawsuits.
for that one lawsuit, correct? Because and in that lawsuit, I asked for um, a temporary restraining order against all of the Army to stop the shot mandate. Now, luckily, this mandate's been removed. Unfortunately, the way that it's been removed is kind of concerning, because there will be no case law set upon it, because it wasn't allowed to go to the courtroom, basically. And most of these lawsuits, they're getting tossed out, saying, "Oh, well, they're moot now because they're no longer relevant."
And so the cases are no longer relevant because we actually did have success with getting the mandate removed.
Right, but the only reason we have the laws in the books right now is because the mandate wasn't removed, and it went all the way to the court system, and the court system made, those laws that I mentioned earlier, 21 USC 360 BBBB3 and 10 USC 1107 alpha. Those laws came out of the lawsuit, Doe versus Rumsfeld.
Oh, wow.
And so we won't get that benefit of going to the court and having federal law be passed because of the problems that they've caused us.
It's so crazy. So what is your hope for these three lawsuits, and like where do they stand?
Well, I hope we find truth and justice. That's the biggest thing. And there's been over 8,000 service members that have been discharged specifically for this and this alone. And they need to be, and there's this idea of reinstating them. I don't ever want to be reinstated. I don't want to ever be under the thumb of someone that can tell me what to do, how to do it, and potentially take away my license, because that's what they're trying to do. They've reported me to the Texas Board, Medical Board, through this system called the National Practitioner Data Bank. And after they restored my privileges, they go, "Oh, well, all of this didn't meet criteria for us to report the National Practitioner Data Bank." But you already did, is the problem. And because they did, I've been under investigation in Texas for my license since December of 21.
Now, to push back on you a little bit, like just because this is the criticism that has been put forth, I don't with Stuart Scheller, someone else I've interviewed, the criticism that he gets from even fellow servicemen is, well, this is what you signed up for. You signed up to not be a civilian, essentially, to follow the chain of command, to follow orders. And so, what do you say when you hear criticism like that?
That's coming from a place of someone who has no understanding of how the medical system works at all. Because even though my commander is my commander, they cannot tell me how to practice medicine. Because at the end of the day, it's my medical license, not that nurse's medical license. Again, not that nurse's medical license. Not that there's anything wrong with nurses. I'm married to one. But a nurse has a certain education program. Doctors have a different education program. I was specifically hired, if you will, did a permanent change of station to be the medical director. And the medical exemptions I gave were revoked by this commander by giving a military order, which I now look at as an unlawful order.
Yeah. And that's what's so crazy. And so your commander did not have the medical license you did, like you said. was more nurse status. And we even saw this when it came to pharmacists who were squeezing in there between doctor-patient relationships and refusing to dispense doctors' prescriptions. So it's just, where did people get off like thinking that they know more? And then even if there's, you know, any trolls now or later, because that happens, these people will spout out off probably criticisms of you, an actual doctor, when they're just someone at their keyboard. I mean, it's crazy.